In terms of soils here with such diversity as well, how does that play out in the expression
Soils
of your
are the
wines?
things that give you the nuance and change the wines in more subtle ways. For instance, at the sites that I'm working with, Maynard and Jerome has a vineyard that is a lot of volcanic ash and this material that was spit out of a volcano at one time. Down in Page Springs, I have kind of basaltic topsoils, more classic gray black volcanic material, but underneath it I have limestone. Okay, down in the Wilcox area, we have, we're in a broader valley there with deeper soils. We have kind of a sandy, clay, loam, rocky alluvium that's eroded off the Dos Cabezas and Chiricahua Mountains over millennia. Up in Bonita Springs, we have a lot of decomposed granite. So having said that, I see marked differences in the styles of wines coming out of each of these vineyards. Let me narrow down and just talk about the two in the Wilcox area.
Sure.
Because climate-wise, I think they're very similar. The granitic soils up in Bonita Springs on the north side of Wilcox in Graham County, the wines we get from that site, because let's use Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot as an example, because we're growing that at both sites. The wines from Bonita Springs and the granite are much leaner, more structured. They have a more apparent acid structure. They're more minerally, and they're just, I would call them more old world, Bordeaux-like. The tannins are more intense. They're grippier, and the wines just kind of have more skeleton than meat per se. And when we jump down and look at the exact same varietals down at Arizona Stronghold, where we have more clay loam, and it's eroding, from mass wasting off of more volcanic, what we call, I don't want to get too technical, but extrusive volcanic material up there. If you've ever been to Chiricahua, you've seen some of it, or the Dos Cabezas. Those wines are fleshier, and they tend to be a little softer and richer. So here we have two counterparts, the same varietals grown only 15, 20 miles from one another, but they're completely different. The neat thing is they really work well together in blending. So if on one hand I've got this Arizona Stronghold Merlot that's a little too soft, I've got this well-structured, nice acidic, a little more tannin over Bonita, I can blend those together now and create a wine that's more complex, more ageable.
Are there certain grapes that are sort of more mainstream and you're pretty confident work well here?
I think so. We've probably got 20 plus varietals growing right now. I would say that I'm very impressed with Syrah for a number of reasons, and I think the Bordeaux varietals are doing well here. Cab and Merlot and Cab Franc. Cab Franc might be a little bit of a challenge because it's kind of late ripening, and only time will tell. Petit Verdot, I think, is a great example.
Right.
But of the Rhones, I actually think Syrah is the best because it's the thickest skin and it's the loosest cluster. And one of the big challenges we have, of course, is rot associated with monsoon rains. I love Petit Syrah. We make fabulous Petit Syrahs here, but it's so much more of a challenge to grow because the clusters tend to be very tight, like Pinot Noir, and they're very rot prone. So that's red varietals. I think whites, I love Viognier, but we have a lot of problems with frost because it tends to come out early. I think we've done a nice job with Chardonnay, same problem. Right now, I'd say Malvasia is probably our most exciting white varietal.
Why is that?
Number one, just from the perspective of the wines that we make from it, it's amazingly aromatic and exciting to me, just the character of the wines. You sniff the wine, you think it's going to be a dessert wine, but it creates these beautifully structured, high acid, minerally, grape fruity, just wonderful citrus qualities.
You tend to use it more in a blend versus
we're doing
varietal?
both, actually. In fact, it's our most planted white varietal now. We've had, number one, we love it as winemakers and wine growers. The marketplace, the people we share it with love it, both in blends and by itself. And it's a moderate yielder, and it's doing really well. If it gets lightly frosted, the secondary buds that it puts out tend to be fairly fruitful, so it's pretty well suited to our climate. And people just love it. So it's nice making wines that you love and that other people love too.
Sure. Do you think Malbec has any potential?
I'm glad you brought that up. The first 2 years that we were farming Arizona Stronghold, our vineyard manager, Fabian Grandoli, actually was from Argentina. And he constantly looked around, he goes, God, it looks just like Mendoza to me, just like Mendoza. So we actually have an experimental block of Malbec that Fabian planted before he left. He moved back to Paso to be close to his family. And we're really excited about it. Hopefully we'll get our first harvest off it next year. And if it does, we have a very old world, simple approach. We just stem the grapes. Generally speaking, we don't do any whole cluster, although there are times when we do small amounts and try to utilize the stems in special situations. We do whole berry fermentations with our reds and small open top fermenters. Generally speaking, we don't pump over, we punch down. And we punch down relative to the nature of the grape that year and what our goals are for that. So we might punch down more intensively in some situations to get a little more extraction, others less. We generally speaking are using cultured yeasts that have been isolated from the regions where the grape's derived, although any one of our fermentations by the end is going to be fermented by both wild yeast and our cultured yeast. We use cultured yeast largely to make sure the fermentation's actually finished, because a lot of wild yeast generally aren't tolerant to higher alcohols above 12% or so. Even though our alcohols aren't super high, but we don't want open top fermentations, punch downs. We free run them. Generally that's our highest quality must. Solids go into a small cylindrical bladder press. We separate our press fractions. Generally speaking, the harder press fractions are not as high quality, so we cull them out and we treat them separately, and they may or may not make it into our wines. And then we age in small oak casks, generally 58 to 60 gallon oak casks. Majority of our wood is derived from the center of France, a little bit of Hungarian, a little bit of American. Although I'd say at this point 80 to 90% of our barrels are neutral barrels, so we're not interested in oaking our wines heavily. And if anything, my goal with barrel seasoning, because really barrels about aging wine, not about flavoring it. But with regards to flavoring, I think my mantra is you did a great job with oak if you'd only notice it if it weren't there. So if you're all of a sudden, if you had a wine that you love and you didn't notice any oak, but I was able to strip it out and then it wasn't as good, that would be my goal. With white wines, we're generally pressing. We go whole cluster into the press. Excuse me. Pump the juice into stainless steel. We do long, cold fermentations in stainless with the majority of our white wines. We do some barrel ferments with Chardonnay and Pinot Gris.
Well, Eric, what's the benefit of the cold fermentation?
It's really pretty. I mean, the main reason is quite simple. Red wine making, philosophically and conceptually, is all about trying to get everything you can out of the skins. Okay. And you let those fermentations get warm because the heat helps extract color, flavor, etc. from the skins. White wine making, in my opinion, is the exact opposite. You're doing everything you can to avoid what's in the skins, thus separating the juice from the skins right off the bat. And then also to me, white wines are all about aromatics. And so, not to say that it's not important, the nose of a red wine isn't important, but I'd stick my neck out and say that I think the palate of the white wine, the palate of the red wine is a little more important than the nose per se. Obviously both are important, but to me on a white wine, when you sniff a white wine, it's got to be effusively aromatic, and it's really got to jump out at you. And when you see people swirling their glasses, what you're doing by swirling your glass is you're breaking weak molecular bonds. The aromatics in that wine are weakly bound to other components of the wine, and they're more volatile, so they break off easier. You swirl it, they go up. Wines, I think we're making great wines, and it'll come down to the palates of the folks tasting it.
Thanks a lot, Eric, and good luck with the 2010 vintage coming up.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.